Hello, welcome to episode 30 of Inspireland. Haemin Sunim is a Zen meditation teacher and international best-selling author from South Korea. His teachings on mindfulness, emotional well-being, and finding joy and balance in the midst of a busy modern life has touched millions of people across the world. His books have sold over 6 million copies and have been translated into more than 38 languages. In South Korea alone, his book became the best-selling book of the decade. And today I talk to him about how we can all bring aspects of Buddhism into our lives today, the importance of finding balance in our lives, and how to answer that all-important and vital question of who am I? This is Haemin Sunim. Haemin, it's wonderful to have you here today. Thank you so much for joining me. And the reason for getting you on was really because of your book, which a really good friend of mine gifted me this book. And I got about 10 pages in and said, I must speak to you. I have to speak to you. It's a wonderful book. It teaches a lot about Buddhism, but also practical things that we can take away into our own lives today. And when reading it, I just wondered, what would you say is one of the most misunderstood things about Buddhism?
Um, I think people say Buddhism is about suffering, life is suffering, impermanent, and therefore you may have very pessimistic, view about. Uh, they assume that Buddhists must be very pessimistic, but it is really about freedom. You can become free from suffering. You can become rediscover your own true wealth, true self-values, your innate, uh, identity, indestructible and free identity. So uh, it is a message of hope rather than a message of despair and suffering.
Mm. How can we begin to bring aspects of Buddhism into our lives today? Because we don't have to announce that we're a Buddhist and then follow every teaching, but there are ways to do it in our everyday lives. How do we begin to do that?
Yeah, it's rather simple. Whenever we are suffering, and rather than completely caught in our thinking mind, and thereby you are completely absorbed in this daily drama of what's happening and trying to figure out who's right and who's wrong and whose fault it is. And instead, you just notice, oh, I am suffering because I am resisting what is given. When our mind is this state of resistance, whatever that is, you immediately feel, unhappy. You immediately feel a little bit of, suffering there. Um, that's pattern number one.
Mhm.
That is, whenever we resist to what is, there is suffering.
Mm,
So realizing that it will be like first step. And another really easy pattern is, wanting something that is not here. We want something that is not here. Maybe you want something other than what is.
mm,
And we call that grasping in Buddhism. So you grasp, something that is not here, and therefore you suffer.
mm,
So we tend to imagine that the source of our suffering is outside, out there, what other peoples are doing to us. Yeah, what the world is happening that makes me feel the victim, feel like a victim. But what Buddhism suggests is, hey, just take a one step back and see the pattern of your mind. you are looking for what is not here, you are grasping something other than what is,
Mm,
or you are resisting what is given here.
mm,
Either this grasping or resistance cause us to feel unsatisfied, unhappy. Um, when you have that realization, then you are following Buddhist teaching.
mm. How do you do that in terms of getting that balance right? Because surrendering to what is very helpful, but you also do need to set goals for your life. There are things that you want. For example, some might say, I would like to get married, I would like to have children. So, how do you set those goals, but at the same time accepting what is now?
I would just rephrase it as an appreciation, being able to appreciate what is already here, right? And being able to appreciate what is already here doesn't prevent you from setting a goal and moving forward. So let's say I appreciate, wonderful coffee, or a nice glass of water that I have. Yeah, and I appreciate this opportunity that I have with you, Rory, being able to talk to people in Ireland or other parts of the world. I appreciate that you read my book. I am so happy that you read my book. So, like celebrating what is here rather than, looking for something that is not here.
Mm,
Yeah. So when we begin to appreciate what is already here, we have more energy, more connections, more happiness, which allows us to move forward and do other things that you are motivated for your future, and not just for yourself, hopefully for your loved one and for your family, friends, and people around you.
mm. So it's okay to set those goals. It's okay to say, I would like this, but I suppose be cautious of relying on those for happiness.
Right, right, right. So rather than quickly, blaming other people
Mm,
that you are making me feel, this way, I feel bad, I feel horrible, and you are the cause. Rather than doing that, you realize, oh, it is my own mind is doing it. The
mm,
resistance or grasping something. So, shifting away from resistance or grasping, each way is appreciations,
mm,
or gratitude.
mm,
So finding gratitude, you will realize you don't have to resist and you don't have to grasp. What is already here is already wonderful.
mm. I think something about Buddhism that I've really enjoyed over the past number of years, and it was outlined heavily for me in another book, in this wonderful book. It's a fantastic read. And something that I really took away from that about Buddhism, and correct me if I'm wrong, but it's what I felt I took away, was the word balance. Whereas so many other ways of living and other teachings can sometimes do, you must do this, you should do this, here's a list of rules imposed. With Buddhism, there's a real balance and choice. Can you explain more about that?
Right. Rather than it's some sort of prescriptive rules that you have to follow, uh, as we live our lives, we make mistakes. We overdo things, we overindulge. Sometime I like some sweet, dessert. And then after finishing the whole entire cake or something, then you realize, oh, there's no more, joy. Instead, I feel, terrible afterwards, some guilt maybe.
Mm,
So then you learn, okay, next time I'm going to have only the half of what I had today. So we are learning, little by little. It is not to make us feel bad, just to find what works for us and what's going to bring us more happiness, more gratitude, and a healthy body and mind. So we experiment, here and there, and therefore we learn, in the process. I do believe that we are here to learn. This Earth school is one of the most demanding schools because it makes us feel as though we are separate from each other's. This illusion of separation is so strong. Yeah, I am here, you are there, you are different from me and you have nothing to do with me. That's sort of like a feeling, why do I care? I am located within my body, inside my skin, and what's outside of my skin is not me. That feeling is so strong.
Mm,
And you end up also, identifying yourself with your own tribe, your family, your country, your religions, whatever. And while creating an enemy, like our humankind, you divide and things as though they have nothing to do with me,
mm,
But this is just the whole illusion. So while we are in this earth school, we have given this opportunity to become awakened, out of these illusions. If you go meet anybody, like a group of people, let's say you dislike, people from another country that you don't like, or different religions, you know, go have lunch with them, have a coffee with them, tea with them, and then you quickly realize they are not different from you at all,
mm. I think
right?
that I think that's a really interesting point, and I think we can see that hugely when it comes to, meeting someone, wherever it may be, at a party or at a pub or restaurant, wherever it is, and someone has a different political view from you, and there's this kind of I'm right, you're wrong. I'm going to put my view, I'm going to try to change your view. But you're saying that actually, if we just listen to those that have maybe opposing views to us, that it would bring more peace, more harmony.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, absolutely. Um, rather than just listening to what they're saying, just listen to what's motivating them to say in such a way. Maybe they had their own upbringing in such a way. They grew up in a very conservative or liberal family, and therefore naturally they have very conservative or liberal in idea, or they grew up or they live in that area, where predominantly conservative or liberal people live, or the way we associate with our friends, sometimes our neighbors, our close friends, their view end up becoming my view, right?
Mm,
So but I'm doing the same thing, right? Like exactly the same thing. That is, I follow certain idea because that's how I was, raised in my family, in my, city, within my circle of friends. So how is it different from them? Their political view might be different, but the way they form their own idea, it's exactly through the same things.
mm,
And also, they believe that by having those views, it's going to bring better like life, I guess, better life or uh, and one thing for better life, we have the same goal too. So the means through which we want to get there might be different.
mm,
Yeah, but our deep desire to have a better life, it is the same. So finding this sort of connections,
mm,
underneath all this differences, I think this can also bring us to feel more harmonious,
Mm,
rather than feeling that that person has to change. Instead, oh, I'm doing the same thing,
mm,
like the way the other person is doing, and like the way I want my view to be respected.
mm,
I can respect his view.
mm. How do we do that when anger presents itself? Because it's a very natural human condition reaction. How do we do that in those moments to remember to show love?
Um, I mean, we learn when we express our anger, like physically, then we get into trouble, right? And so we learn. Or when we say things out of anger, at that moment, we might feel really good. But sooner or later, it has consequences, right? From our loved one or our friends or from our communities. You'll destroy the bond you have, through very angry words, right?
Mm,
And so we learn, and maybe, rather than expressing my anger in this like violent way, you can express it. Without, any kind of, violence, violent intent. Um, and at the same time, we can ask ourselves, what's underneath this anger? Why
mm,
am I feeling this angry? Perhaps because um, I want to protect myself or my feeling, and I feel like, I have been violated, those feelings and the sense of wealth, worth, my sense of worth has been violated, and so it is out of my, love and respect that I feel this anger.
mm,
So like, tap into what's underneath, because something bigger story is waiting right underneath the anger. Yeah.
mm,
And like, for example, I feel like by listening to that the way this person behaved towards me, I feel diminished. My value has been diminished, and I feel like I'm not heard. I'm not being heard. Um, then you can ask, is it true that my value is diminished by what this person is saying?
mm.
And then you realize that's not true.
And I
Yeah,
suppose,
my value is not diminished, like they can have their own opinion, yeah,
yeah,
right?
because
But
it goes back to you can't change them.
yeah, it's very hard to change others, unless they are willing to change themselves.
Mm,
Usually, when we experience extreme, suffering, only then we realize, I need to change.
mm,
Yeah. Until we hit that bottom, rock bottom, we just go on and do the same thing
yeah.
without, full awareness. So being wise is that we learn, oh, I do have this pain, suffering. Maybe it can be very subtle or it can
Yeah.
be very obvious. And then I say, oh, what is pattern? Why am I, having this pattern again and again? And then try to work with that
Mm.
and assigning the blame to other people.
And is that voice that's coming through that in those moments of self-reflection, is that your mind's voice or is that a different voice?
I think it's our wisdom, innate wisdom is calling us, right? We have an ego, very much like a story of me, separate, identity that we want to hold on to, whether it's our personality or our body or what kind of life story we accumulated. We just think that we are separate, different from the rest of the world, and we try to hang on to that separate identity, which is made of words, made of, stories. And this ego is one thing, but Our true self is much, much bigger and greater and freer and loving and kind and compassionate
Mm,
and connected than this ego, okay?
mm,
So don't think you are just mere ego and you have to go out and defend yourself whenever somebody's offending you, because you are much better and greater and free and wonderful and infinite and
mm.
than what you think you are.
That's an interesting way of kind of seeing beneath those layers that we have created probably unconsciously throughout our lives in a kind of way to protect us. I suppose one of the questions that a lot of people have difficulty in finding an answer to is the question of who am I? Do you have difficulty in answering that question, and where do you begin to answer that question?
Um, this is really crucial questions in Buddhism, right? And it's not just about Buddhism, any philosophy, any religion. We are so interested in this question of who am I, right? And then we often identify, this who am I with object. What I mean is, object here means something that we can observe. Like, for example, we identify ourselves with our body. Yeah, our body can be observed, right? We can see, our hands, our leg, we can look at our face on a mirror. So it is an object, like the way this cup is an object, which means there is a subject, observer, that is observing this object, which is called the body, right? So then the question is, what is that which is observing? Not the things that can be observed, such as our body or our personality or our, stories, our nationality, religion, and whatever that is. All of that can be described. They can be observed, they can be written, and then communicate, which means all of them can be observed. Then the question is, what is that which is observing? Do you understand what I'm saying?
I'm with you. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. So, what is that which is observing? Yeah, what is that which knows everything?
What
Yeah, that's the
um,
that's the more, important question.
what
What
is
is
it?
Okay, yeah, let's go with this. So, like, we have different emotions, different feelings, yeah, and we know this feeling comes and goes. Sometimes we are annoyed, sometimes we are joyful, we have worrisome, thoughts, and then we have, wonderful, appreciation, the moment of appreciations, whatever that is, it comes and goes. But that which knows coming and going, what is that? In Buddhism, in Zen tradition, we ask that question in the form of koan, what is it? What is that which knows everything?
And is there an answer to that or not?
Obviously, do you feel that you exist or no?
I feel it. Yeah. I mean, when we're having this conversation, I'm kind of pinning it to soul and spirit.
Yeah, we want to call it like a spirit or soul or awareness or mind and some other terms, right? But right underneath those terms, let's take the sticker, those, term that is written, take the
Mm.
sticker out and then try to see what's underneath that which we call spirit or mind, awareness, consciousness, what is that? Clearly, we know we are here, we exist,
Mm.
but we've been often identify ourselves with uh, not with that subject that is observing, but with the object that can be seen, that can be written about, that can be described. What is that which cannot be described and yet always there?
I get you. I get you. It's now feeling less like a soul and spirit and more like a life force.
Yeah, as long as
Mm.
we label it, as a life force,
Mm.
spirit, or you are turning that into an object.
Understood. Yeah.
Yeah, it's because life's force somehow you can be observed, no
Mm.
matter, although it's very subtle, right? Very
Mm.
subtle. Yeah. But if we, as long as we label it, name it, whether it's awareness, Buddha, God, mind, whatever, then
Mm.
it instantly becomes object.
Mm.
So then what is that which is always, you know, on? It's always on. We know everything. That
Mm.
is, like, for example, we don't try to hear, like, for example, Haemin's my voice. It just naturally you understand. Naturally, there's no effort. Effortlessly, we just know everything. When we go out, walk around, you see a dog, you see a tree, you see a, sky, the blue sky. Effortlessly, you know. Yeah.
Can it be felt?
Yeah. What is that which is knowing all of this?
Mm.
That has to be you, right? Our body comes and goes. It changes. As we get older, we have more wrinkle and right? Our personality changes and our circumstance and our political view might change, as we get older. But what is that which is not changing? What is that which is there always, on? It's turned on all the time, and yet doesn't have any shape or form,
Mm.
but ever present.
Mm.
And because it doesn't have any shape or form, it cannot be destructive.
Mm. Does
I
that
mean,
help us to find our life's purpose?
yeah, once you realize who you truly are, that is this diamond-like, you know, undestructible, no matter what happened in the world. Yeah, like this undestructible, nameless, and yet ever present, the freedom. This, you makes you feel free. All this attachment that you had, that oh, my name, my whatever, my country, my religion, all this, grasping you've been doing because you thought that is who you are. And all this grasping has been let go, and instead what's there is ever-present awareness, ever-present, unnameable freedom, from all those, feeling that I have to do something to make me feel happier or peaceful. And instead, you realize in this ever-present uh, I,
Mm.
already peaceful, already content.
Mm.
Yeah. And then already compassionate and loving. So from that spirit of, experience of love and compassion, you can go out and serve other people.
Mm.
Yeah, that's the whole point. We
Mm.
are here to serve others and to realize our own connection to the universe,
Mm.
uh, rather than thinking that we are limited self.
Mm. What's your, as we close our conversation in the final minutes, what's your greatest teaching that you would like to give to people in the name of serving for people to walk away with today?
I don't know about greatest teaching, but I can say that, you want to live your life, uh, and you want your spirit, what you said, Rory, in the to be feel proud of. Yeah, like I always think about the death, when we die and we take off this clothes, we've been wearing, the skin, that's meat suit, that we've been having. We take off this meat suits away and realize, oh my goodness, I it was a colossal mistake that I thought that I was a mere, humans, it was the something amazing spirit that is having temporary human life, and we fought, and we thought that all those minor little things were so important, and we argue and spend, a lot of time, we wasted so much time. So rather than doing that, let's say, let's bring, do some, say something nice to other people that they can help them change their life for the better. Sometimes I go out and I help homeless people. I've been doing it for a while, and then whenever I give food to them, uh, I'm hoping that they will be happier, they will get, healthier. So my good intention is making me feel really happy.
Mm,
Yeah.
mm,
Hoping, they're wishing their well-beings and all that. So live a life that your spirit can be proud of.